Hi guys, welcome once again to Otto's Garage. It's 2 degrees outside, but it's nice and cozy in here. Let's get cracking. Anyway, this is what we've been up to. A lot of wiring in the back of, but basically I've got that dash in situ now, and I've got all the clocks in, the turbo gauge, the oil pressure gauge. This little light down here, that is for my daytime running lights, so I know that they're on. But otherwise, that is looking mighty good and in situ. I've got a bugger about with the panel over here. That's not quite sitting nice, and I think I'm going to have to fix that into the back of the binnacle first before I put it in, because the wire which basically goes off down to the heater valve is just kind of pulling it on an angle there, and it's just popping it out. So I'll fix that in properly, I think, and then we can get it all mounted up correctly. So that's looking good. So yep, we are liking that a lot, and that is a big step forward. I've also finished wiring up down in the other footwell the water pump. That's all sorted out now. I've just got to drop the instrument binnacle in the middle there, sorry, the console binnacle, and it's console in the middle, and then basically we should be able to try and get some power down to everything and just see if it's all going to work before I tidy up all those wires underneath. So a big step forward. I think I am pretty much there with that interior wiring, and that is a big relief. I've just realised that wearing this hat, I look a little bit like that character out of Men in Black who can foresee the future. Not sure it's a good look. On the engine bay side of things, I've fitted this tube which basically goes to a pressure actuator, which is the turbo boost. That goes back off there and just runs off the one of the vacuum hoses off the inlet manifold there. Still got a bit of earthing to do here. That's simple enough. This little doohickey is the speed sensor. So although that disappears through down there to get to the back of the dash, I'm going to have to chop into that, extend it down, because I want to fit it right the way down there. You can kind of see that down there is the end of the drive shaft. I think I can fix it onto there. There's a magnet got to go on that, and then I'll just have to build a little bracket which will sense it when it goes past. In the I'm going to take this hat off. In the actual control for the dash, you can determine what the rolling circumference is of the wheel. So basically we'll have to measure that, and then we can set that in the computer and tell it that for every revolution, each time it passes that magnet, it's going to have travelled so many meters. So that's just something to work out afterwards. I'm not too fussed about that at the moment. I've been looking at the lines now for the oil cooler. So basically we've got these Dash 8 AN fittings, and they are going to go back down to the outlet. Basically this is off the top of the fuel filter housing, blah blah blah. But I'm just waiting for a couple of fittings to arrive on that. I've had to change those over from the factory to AN. But the lines themselves are good. This other long line which is running across the front, that is the return to the power steering, and over on this corner we will have our oil cooler for the power steering. This line that's coming out here, that shoots back over, and we'll follow that all the way through down, and that goes down to the rack, so where that Jubilee clip is there. So that is the return, in effect the low pressure side of things. It's high pressure to the rack obviously, and I'm going to run that high pressure one round the bulkhead off the pump in this corner, but I haven't got that at the moment. However, something has arrived, and I got this really kind of cheap off Eric Bay. Somebody obviously had it sat on their shelf, didn't want to use it, but it's brand new and it's never been used. And here it is, somewhere in here. I'm hoping there will be a little package and inside said package there should be a little cooler, and that's tidy. So that's just a little 2-inch by 2-inch cooler. Again, it's got AN fittings on it as well. I'm not sure what size they are. I'm going to have a look at those now. But that is a very nice little bit of kit, and that is going to be mounted similar to the other one on the other side. We're going to mount that down here somewhere. So that'll be in the airflow again, and then I'll just have to work out a couple of bracket fittings for it and then get the piping done. I'm fitting the starter down here now. You can just see the solenoid there and the starter alongside it. And that shiny bolt up at the top, that was easy enough to get to. However, there's another bolt which is directly under the solenoid. And what I'm using is my good friend, Mr. Mirror. And then straight away, you can kind of see in the mirror there, there's a little, there's another bolt. And I've got the socket on it. And that's the extension bar just coming off it there, you can see in the mirror. And that is fantastic. It means you can kind of see round corners. So I'd get yourself one of these little mirrors. It's got a little LED light in it, little switch on the back. And basically, I think places like Lidl and Aldi will sell those as a set. I think I also got a magnetic torch as well. But you have them down there, you can just get around all those nasty little corners. I would have absolutely hated to do this you know, on a standard integrale, which has got that metal shelf that we cut off many episodes ago. You just can't see anything down there, but that's not too bad. So now I've managed to find that bolt. I'm going to get on the end of the socket and we'll get that tightened up, and then that starter is on. Just needs a couple of electrical connections and she'll be good to go. Well, I got that bolt in okay with the help of that mirror, and now I've managed to get some cables onto that starter motor too. And this is what we've got basically. So we've got from the bus bar our main feed coming down, and we've also got our cable which I've put in this black sheathing. That's coming from the alternator over on the other side. I don't know if you can see that. It's a bit tricky. Anyway, it's down here. There, you can see that. So the sheathing comes in here, and that's the alternator. And then basically we've also got the feed off this one here is the starter solenoid, and that goes back up into that trunking over there, and then over there to our solenoid, which is hiding under the breather bottle. So that's all cool. That is all ready to rock now. So the other thing that I am going to do, this top bolt on the starter here, I'm going to run an earth off that. I cleaned up the terminal behind there, and we're going to have an earth coming off there back to the body, so we've got a decent earth from the engine going across. I think there are a couple of other earths that need to go on the engine as well. But in any event, that is looking very good indeed. This one that's flying up here off the alternator, that is our warning light, basically, charging warning light. But that's very good. I'm very pleased to have that starter motor on. I'm feeling very ecstatic, as you can tell. Okay, these are the fittings off the oil filter housing unit. So we can convert basically from M22 down to AN8, which are what we've got on the end of our oil lines. So those two little beauties drop straight in, and happy days, I can get the oil lines connected up, which is going to mean that all of the oil cooler and the fittings for there are going to be complete. And there they are connected. So happy days. That clears the filter. On this side we can still get at the filter, and all good in the hood. The final unions and hoses have arrived, both for the power steering and some of the fuel injection. And this is what we've basically got. So this is the power steering hose. It's basically Teflon lined. It's got like a PVC wrap on it, and it has got stainless braid, which is quite nice. We like that. You get these specific fittings for them. So these are basically like just a large version of the hard line brake fittings that you'd normally get for doing your brake conversions on your calipers. And then this is the tricky bit, or the trick bit I should say. This basically screws into the electric pump. So that fitting there goes into, I think that's an M16 by 1.5, and then obviously the braided line then fixes onto the end of that, which is great. That fits perfectly in the electric pump. The other end is a slightly different size. That's still in that bag over there, but that is a just a different size thread which goes into the steering rack, but fundamentally the same bit of kit. On the side here we've got a fuel filter. So although I've got one in the back after the swirl pot, I've also got one before it goes into the injector rails, just to be safe. And then this will have AN6 fuel line going up to the fuel rail, and then AN6 fuel line coming from the bulkhead fitting. There's a 90-degree down there as well. This little doohickey is basically a T, so that goes on the bottom of the oil filter housing, and it means that I can run my oil temperature and my low oil pressure warning light off that, so that'll go in there. Where I've currently got the oil pressure capillary tube going out, I think I'm going to move that and put that on the side, and then put the oil pressure the oil temperature sender in underneath in the current place at the bottom of it. I think that'll just offer a bit more protection for the capillary tube, which, as you can see at the moment, is kind of down there. So you can see that, yeah. So that's the capillary tube. Oh, let's go underneath. Which is going in under the oil filter housing there at the moment, and I'm going to bring that out the side. So where we've got that threaded way in here, that's where that T is going to go on there, and then I'll just swap that over, so that'll be a little bit better. And then this is our temperature sender, so that's going to go underneath, currently where the capillary tube is hanging out of. I hope that makes sense, but in any event, that's what I'm going to do. I'll show you when it's done. The other end of the fuel rail has basically just got this pipe which goes over a push-on bulb fitting down there, so that's just the stock pipe. So I'll put a hose finisher on the end of that where that tape is currently, and then this will go up to a pressure regulator which will mount up here somewhere, I think, so we can then have a gauge on that and adjust the pressure regulation on the fuel being supplied to the injectors. And then we are pretty much there with a couple of extra systems done. I'm still waiting for a couple of fittings to go on the end of my what is this thing called? It's the oil cooler. And when I've got those, because I've basically got to convert, it's AN10 at the moment, we've got to convert to AN8 on that. So we're just stepping that down. When I've got those, we can fit that, and we will have the power steering system complete. Having a look at the fuel lines. So this is basically from the filter in the engine bay, and that goes down onto the bulkhead. So I've just got to tighten that up in our little Motormech vise, which is very handy for not damaging these lovely red anodized fittings on the end there. So I'll wind that up, get that closed off, and then that one should be ready to go on the car. At the injector rail end, I've fitted the fuel line onto the end of the rail there. That's that lovely rail that we had connected up, and you can see the first injector down there. And then just under there, we've got our fuel filter. So that fits quite nicely on a existing bulkhead bolt that we had in there down here, and you can see that from above. So that's the filter there, and then where that open end is, it's going to have that fuel line that we just made up, and that will come down and go onto this bulkhead fitting down here. I'll just move those wires out of the way for the minute. You'll be able to see that. So you've got two coming out of there. This near side one goes to the engine, and the far side one goes from the pressure regulator back down to the tank. And there it is. So you can see that's fitted nicely into the bulkhead, and it goes back across there to our fuel filter. So I just need to have this one on this side, which will then come up to the end of our fuel rail, which is under there somewhere. Where are we? Can you see the end of the fuel rail? No, you can't, because the angle's all to shit. There. That's the end of the fuel rail, just up here, basically. So basically, I've got to run my pressure regulator off there, and then I will go down. I think I'll mount that probably on the rail up here somewhere, then drop down to the bulkhead underneath. And then we are done with our fuel. Once that fuel pressure regulator's in and the associated hoses, and I've got the elbow, which is on order for the oil cooler for the steering oil, that is, power steering cooler. We are very, very near to getting this thing going. I have got to put a lot of fluids in it, but yeah, it's nearly there. Fingers crossed. Well, it's another Saturday night in Otto's garage, and we've just been working on some of the main electrical feeds and terminals on that. So I'll just show you what we've done there. So basically, in the back of the car, we have got our battery box. And I've just put a couple of the main terminals which go into the battery box. So we've got our negative, that's just had a terminal crimped on it. And then that feeds down to a point down by the handbrake there, and that basically is where the main earth is. And then we've got a positive one which runs all the way up the central transmission tunnel, gets past the belt, and then that disappears round the back of the center console down there. Obviously I haven't clipped any of that at the moment, and we've still got a couple of little connections that we've got to do to the ECU. That's what these are here. And then I've just got to basically tidy up the wiring, but I don't want to do any of that until we know that it's all working. So on the front, what I've done round there is fit a couple of earths off the engine. So we've got one here off the cylinder head, and that's running down and picking up the chassis rail point down there, which is the same earth that we've got our good friend here, the power steering pump. We've actually got some fluid in the power steering pump now. You can see that line there, and you can see the hard line which comes off the pump, and then that runs around as we said before. The other earth that I've fitted is this one on the back of the starter motor, which you can see in there. So that's just picking up off that stub work down here, and then that runs through and comes down onto the main chassis rail, which is on the back of that right hand engine mount. So we've got a couple of earths off the engine, so that should be good for a go on all of that lot. What else have we been doing on here? We've just been sorting out all sorts of little wires to power up other bits and bobs as well. And things like the fan wiring sorted out. This is the earth for the temperature switch. I'm still waiting for a fitting to go in here. When I get that fitting in, I'll be able to get the NPT fittings, which are down here. So one of those is the low pressure warning switch, which is that one. That's the sensor we've got for the temperature for the gauge, and then the only other one then is the feed to the pressure gauge, oil pressure gauge. So when they're done, that's all good to go. I'll be able to get some oil in it, but I am nearly at the point. I can't put the radiator back on until I've got those oil fittings on there, because I can't get to them afterwards. And the only other thing that I've got to do is put that flipping exhaust downpipe on, which at the moment is where that tape is come off the turbo. So when I've got the downpipe on and the NPT fittings for the oil ways, I can then get the radiator intercooler back in on the front there, which means we can then test the water. We are at a point where we can test the power steering, and that is probably going to be the next thing I'm going to have a look at. Of course, the other thing that we've got is our good friend, the fuel pressure regulator, which is this puppy down here. So that will tell us the pressure of the fuel that we've got coming out of the fuel rail. We've got a vacuum which is coming off the plenum chamber on that side. You can see there we've got the fuel return line going down, and then that goes off down those hard lines to the back of the car, and then this one here comes off the end of the fuel rail, which we did have a look at before. I don't know if you can see that down there. Yeah, that one down there with the little red hose on the end of that. So that's the end of the fuel rail. So basically when we adjust the twiddly diddly bit on the top there, that will adjust the pressure that we've got, and then we can just see where and what kind of pressure is going to the injectors. So the fuel system is all done. Well, it's come to that time. I am going to test the power steering pump. So what I've done, I have connected up a battery in the back there, so those terminals are all good to go, and we are now going to have a look at what we need at the front here to turn it all on. So basically I've pulled all the fuses out except for the power steering one, and when I turn on something down here, I'm hoping we'll get some ignition. Of course nothing's going to fucking work without our good friend the key. We've got to get that in there first. I don't know what the hell's going to go on now. So when we turn on the ignition, does that send power to our... I don't know. Okay, right, so Motor Gadget Blue is currently off because our trip is off. So if you put the trip on, bingo. We've now got power into the Motor Gadget Blue, and I did see the hazards flash, which meant that was good. So we have got some fluid in the power steering. When I flick on, the pump switch, which is this one, we should end up with a whirring noise. Which we don't. Let's just have a look and see what is occurring there. For some reason we're getting no power into the pumps. Well, what a diphthong. So got the pump going, that was okay, everything fired up nicely, and then it started pissing fluid out everywhere, and the reason being that basically this union down here I didn't actually sort out tightening the bloody union up. So in any event, I've got to tighten that up first, and then I can run it again, and we'll just see whether that pump is actually going to fire some fluid around the system instead of pissing it out all over the engine bay. So with the headlamp unit removed, you can see this is the culprit here that I didn't tighten up properly. So I'm going to, now I've got that out of the way, I can get and tighten that up, and then that'll stop that leaking hopefully. Okay, let's have another go at that. So we'll flick on the main ignition. I'll tell you what, those gauges look pretty cool, don't they? The pump's firing up. I can hear it pushing the fluid through. We don't appear to have any leaks at the moment. However, I think it has run out of fluid. I'm going to have to put some more in. Well, it's a fresh day, and where I thought I was going to be filling up that power steering fluid, I actually managed to locate a secondary leak. So this was the first one that we had here where I haven't tightened that up. There's also a leak coming from this union down here somewhere. So I'm going to have to strip that off, have a look at that, get that sorted out before we can power up again. Right, let's try again. So I have Just tightened that fitting up a bit, pulled it apart and just reconnected it. Let's get some power on and let's get some ignition on. Okay, so that's cool, that's the ignition. Now the pump's fired up. Let's see whether that is going to leak again. Hopefully not. So she's running up, she should stabilise. And she's still leaking, you can see that there. So the leak is coming out of the union where the hose goes in. So I'm going to have to knock that off and we'll go again with that. Just before I do kill it completely, it works an absolute peach. Well, that's fantastic. We now have power steering. We just need to sort that leak. Right, the next system I'm going to try out is the fuel. So that means dropping a bit of petrol in the tank, not a great deal, just enough that the pump can pick it up and we can see whether that pressure regulator is going to do its job at the other end and check the lines for any drips. Let's see how we get on. Right, I've just put about 3 or 4 litres in there. Oh, it's a bit of a turning point, isn't it? Putting fuel in the car. So there should be enough for that pickup down there, just to pick that up. And then hopefully these pumps can fire up and we'll just see where we are and exactly what we're going to do. This one over here is just a breather. Don't worry about that. That's fine. I can just sit there for the moment. We'll have a good idea just exactly what our unions are doing now. So just a quick check, because I'm pretty sure that I did go over all of these before and they were all tightened up. But the proof will be in the pudding, as they say. Okay, so let's have a look and see whether those pumps are going to do their business and if we've got any drips coming out anywhere else. Obviously we don't want any other systems running at the moment. So that's the main motor gadget controller on. I've pulled the fuse out of the power steering, so when we flick the pumps on, there they go. And let's have a look at the front. All sorts of shenanigans going on there. Well, I don't see anything which is jumping out at me in a leak kind of way. So what I'm going to have a look at now is whether I can adjust that regulation on there and get some poundage into our fuel gauge. And there we have it. So now when we adjust the top, you can see you can basically adjust your fuel pressure, and obviously that's going to be dependent on what the ECU wants, but in any event that's working good. So we can get more fuel pressure or less. But we do not have, as far as I can see, now we've got that pressure in the system. It's good news because I cannot see any leaks anywhere. Everything is as dry as a bone. Excellent. Hot on the heels of the power steering and the fuel system check, I'm now having a look at our good friend, the exhaust, and in particular, how it mates up to the turbo on the turbine housing here. Now, what I've had to do is we've got a V-band adapter required on this, which is quite a standard industry turbo exhaust fixing point, but we've had to weld in on the end of the Group A exhaust, basically the ring, which is the other half of where the V-band goes over. However, you can see we've got this kind of the original return flange, and you can see where I've welded on the inside, or rather Matt's welded it for me. And then basically what I'm going to have to do is grind off this tapered original return here, so we're just left with the V-band edge, and then the V-band should fit nicely on that. And then we'll have to dive underneath, and you can see how that kind of snakes its way down the back of the car to the back of the car. There's a few brackets. That one there in particular is in the wrong place. There's one further down, so probably what I'll end up doing is cutting off the brackets, and then when we've got the V-band sorted out, we'll mark up where we need new brackets put in and weld those on instead. I've ground that back now, and you can see how we've got a positive step in our flange instead of the previous taper. So I'll get that offered up on the car, and we'll see if that'll fit and mount up to the turbo. Well, that has worked, and there you can see how that V-band is fitting around the collar that we had welded on there. That's all in a good place. However, it is bloody tight underneath. So you can see here previously this was a second-hand system, and somebody's obviously knocked a dent in there, and I can see why now, because that's touching where that suspension mount is. So we're going to have to do a similar knock on there and just adjust that. However, there are some other bits which we're going to have to look at, notably how it all kind of snakes past everything, and we've got another foul up here. So I am going to leave that well alone at the moment. I'll just get a temporary brace on the back of that, because I'm wondering whether this probably needs a little bit taken out of here and just bringing this across, because we have got a bit of room on the side of the sump there. So if that was taken out and shortened, it would clear this up here, and it might make a bit of difference over there as well, because we can kind of lift it up into the side of the engine a little bit. But I'm kind of thinking that I might even get somebody to have a look at that system once we've got the car going. But either way, with that on there, it does mean that I can at least fire up the engine, and it'll chuck the flames out down there somewhere, rather than burning everything up here without an exhaust on it at all. Fundamentally, happy days. Here's a little doohickey for you. So this is a sensor which determines whether or not you've got enough oil in the engine. Oil lever sensor, basically. And I understand this is quite a rare beast, but I am going to put it in at the moment, mainly because it'll block the hole up, which is in the car at the moment. That goes underneath all of those cams, etc. down there. That little hole that you can see down there, that's where this is going to go into. At a later date, I may well fit a warning light for that, but for the moment, I'm just going to put it in, get the bracket up out of the way, and then we'll just zip tie the cable safely out of the way for the moment. But you can go back in the hole anyway. Gearbox oil. Right, so to fill the gearbox, I had a look around for the fill plug on it, and was then thinking maybe I should just fill it through the dipstick tube. So I stuck a post out on a couple of Lancia groups, and a couple of guys got back to me and said, why don't you fill it through the dipstick tube? So I'm going to fill it through the dipstick tube, which is here. So you can see that that little tube down there, this guy here, that's the dipstick tube. So you can basically test how full your gearbox oil is by pulling the dipstick out there, which I've done. So we've just got the tube now, and what I've done is made up a tube, because obviously just tip the oil down there, it'll just go everywhere. You need a tube to do it. So I've made up this is a suction tube off a oil change vacuum pump, and then I've just kind of stepped it up with a couple of rubber tubes here to get it to a decent thickness, and then you can get a funnel in there and presto, we can fill it. I know the quantity because I've referred to the gearbox capacity basically on there off the manual. So basically all I need to do now is decant my gear oil into a smaller container, get a funnel on there, and then we can fill that up, and bingo dingo, it should all be good. The gearbox oil that I'm using is this stuff, Miller Oils, and I got onto the technical people at OPI, and they gave me a few options. This was high on the list, and I've decided to go with Miller's for the gearbox, the diff, and the engine as well. Great free service from OPI there. If you just need any kind of technical assistance, just drop them an email and they'll give you plenty of options. And they've got a great website for getting a supply of oil off it, and it isn't too expensive either. So when I looked at it, cross-referenced it, I knew I'll be getting decent stuff with good recommendation, and basically not paying stupid amounts for it. So that is what I've done. I'm going with Miller's throughout, and we've got all the decent, correct, slippery stuff. You know, it come out of the ground, it's going back in the engine, whatever. One of the final pieces that I need for my injection stroke ECU jigsaw is this. It's a new O2 sensor. The other one looked a bit tired, and I'm just trying to eliminate as many potential problems as possible. This has come from Tank Barrett down at Ludlow. Thanks guys for sorting that out in double quick time. It literally arrived overnight, and good value as well. You know, there are O2 sensors on eBay, but they haven't got the correct wiring to them, and we wanted to make sure we had the right one for the job. So I'm going to get that popped into the exhaust, and then at least we can get it wired up, and that's another thing done. Right, here's another one, a 5PK768. That's the auxiliary drive belt. So that basically drives the alternator, and I've mounted that thus. The only concern that I've got, and it's not a major one, is the idler basically, which has got tension on it. In effect, it's working the other way around to how we'd normally have it, and I don't know whether I need to put that over the top of it, which would perhaps make more sense, but then I don't know if the belt is going to be long enough. I might just have a quick look at that now. Well, adjusting that belt to have the pulley tensioner on the other side was exactly the right thing to do. So we can see now it is in its correct state. It's coming over the top, and that means that when you adjust this Allen key down here, it's bringing the wheel up, which puts tension on the belt. And that is good. Everything fits nicely on there. So, excuse me, if you want to do a conversion like this and get rid of the water pump and everything, the 5PK760 belt is the one to go for. So that's just powering the alternator. Excellent. There's the O2 sensor fitted. So that goes down into that boss. Now on this system, which is the standard Weber injection, you just have one of those. But there is another boss lower down, which you can't just see there. So I can put a secondary one in for having a wideband sensor if I change the ECU. That lead comes all the way back up here, and then it connects to the original wiring, which is just in there. Dead easy, plug and play. Happy days. Another one off the tick list. Gearbox oil. Right, so to fill the gearbox, we did have a bit of a look and see whether it was possible to get it down the dipstick, which, yeah, was entertaining to say the least. So I quickly gave up on that idea. That's not the way to do it. So somebody suggested, a couple of people whip out the reversing switch off the top of the gearbox, and basically then that will give you a nice big hole to drop the oil into. And this is now. So basically just down there, the other side of that yellow mount, you can see the hole which had the reverse switch in it. The dipstick is over here, although the tube for the dipstick at the moment. So I've taken that out and hopefully that's going to let some air out of the gearbox as we are trying to fill it. Top tip for you: get yourself a little clean work area where you can put the oil out and you're not going to get shit off the contamination off the floor, things like that. I've just made up a little funnel with a reducing tube which will go down into the dipstick, into the reverse switch hole. That's long enough, and then that's our Miller's oil that we've got going in there. And I've got a nice new clean jug. I can measure that exactly. I think we need 3.8 litres of gearbox oil to go in. So basically I'm going to do that a litre at a time, pop it through that funnel, and we'll see how it goes down there. Right, so this is an absolute crap job and takes forever. So what I've done is I've just put a temporary zip tie on here to hold the funnel, and then the fluid can take its own sweet time to go down. This funnel does have a filter in it, which I kind of like, because it just means that in case I get a lump of shit in there, it's not going to end its way down into the gearbox. But you don't want to stand there and watch that, so the great thing is you can just fill up the jug and then tip the jug contents into the funnel, and then basically go and do something else while that finds its way down. That's 1 litre that I've got in there, and I've got 3.8 to go in. So somebody once said I'll be back, and they indeed were. Another top tip for you is that when you get your measuring jug, it's a good idea to mark on the side where that litre is, because when you're kind of, it's on the ground, they're very hard to see these. So don't be afraid to just get the pen out and mark up your jug, basically. And the other thing that I found as well was that when I was actually going around the store, it's a great opportunity for some sexist chat up lines. You can say to the assistant, can I see your jugs? You've got lovely jugs, and other such things like that as well. You might get a slap, but it didn't work for me anyway, because I just went and found the jugs by myself. I finally had that adapter piece arrive, and basically we've now got our low oil pressure switch. So that's the one that will go up and light up on the dash if there's an issue with oil. And then we've got our takeoff down here, which is basically for the live oil feed to the pressure gauge. So that's actual oil pressure rather than having a sender to an electric gauge. We've got that capillary feed, which is just kind of lying down there. So I've just got to get those tied up. You can see underneath we've got our temperature one. I'll just come underneath so you can see that a bit better. So that's the temperature sender there, and that's our kind of T-piece that we've had to get on to get those other 2 sender units in. Get those tied up, get them connected up, and that is the last of our oil feeds done. There they are, all connected up. So basically we've just tried to shield them and keep them away from the exhaust, obviously, and then basically get some decent riv-nut fixed clips on here, these rubber clips to hold that. And then I've just basically zipped, there's a lot of basics going on here, isn't there? I've just zipped these back to the other one, so that's keeping them all under control, and obviously everything's sheathed as well, so it'll help protect those wires. And we've got a common earth down here. These 2 are for the fan on the radiator, so the next thing to do now is probably fit that radiator on the front. I've just jumped forward a little bit while I've been installing all of that front end. The packaging around there is bloody tight. I've got those intercoolers, the radiator, and all of the little coolers for the oil and the power steering. So in any event, that is all on now. I did have to make one adjustment because I was getting a little bit of fouling of this top oil cooler. It was hitting the back of the crash bar there, so I've had to just kind of fiddle around with making the lower bracket here a little bit longer, and that pushed the bottom out, which had the effect of pulling the top in on that side and gave us the clearance that we need. So anyway, with that in mind, I am now ready. I'm pretty sure I've just got to ease this one off here. See how this is touching here? So that just needs easing off. We'll pull that away and that will make that clear, because at the moment that's kind of fouling on the bodywork. But in any event, once that's out of the way, I think we might be able to get some water in her, because I've got two more to do up actually. Those two there, which go onto the heater box, need some clips on those. Once they're done, we might be able to get a bit of water in it and just see whether or not we've got any leaks anywhere. Time will tell on that one. Right, there it is. That's with the turbo blanket on. I'm not convinced it's entirely correct in that I think the wide end should be around the back ideally. But the problem I've got is in there you can see the wastegate lever and the actuator on there. Basically you've got to keep that clear, otherwise it's going to jam. So anyway, she's doing her job. She's stopping the heat getting up into these pipes, etc. It'll keep a bit of the heat out of the oil feed and stuff like that as well. So next thing to do is get the radiator on, a couple of little electrical connections for the fan. The water pipe hose has got to go on there, and I've spun these around so we can get access to them from the top afterwards and tighten those up. Let's get all that back on and then we can get some water into it. It's oil time. Let's get it in the engine. So this is what we're going with for running it in, and then it'll get changed a bit later on. And we basically just got ourselves a nice little funnel in there, and we are going to commence getting some oil in that engine. Right, we've got some oil in there now. I've got about 5 litres at the moment, but what I want to do now is just see whether it will turn over, and then we can just have it pumping some oil around the system before we get the rest of the oil in there. So we've got no ignition on, we haven't even got an ECU on, so I'm going to just fire up the Motor Gadget Blue and see whether the starter will actually turn the engine and get some oil pressure in there, hopefully. Let's have a look and see how it goes. Well, that's kind of momentous for a start. Everything worked, but we haven't got enough battery power on there, so I'm going to have to put the booster onto the battery terminal, and then we can try it again. It should get a bit more revolutions on it. Let's give it a go. How cool is that? Right, I've got Jemima. She's on the button, so we're going to have a look now and just see whether we can get it to go again. Okie dokie. coolio. And the great thing is there's no horrendous mechanical graunching noise or anything. So something that I've done in the engine build has worked, which is good. We like that. Right, so we are still a bit low on power. I'm going to leave that on boost. It should hopefully build the energy up in the battery there, and then we'll try again a bit later. But it's just good to try and get a bit of oil fed around the system. I'll get the dipstick out, we'll have a look at it, and we'll top her up again. Well, that's a cracking turning point for the car, certainly. Everything's doing its job and no horrendous noises down there. You do know that this means that next time we're going to be trying to fire it up. But in the meantime, thanks for watching Otto's Garage. Stay safe, have a cracking weekend or whatever else you're doing, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye!